Hello, I'm Dashiani Navanayagam, and welcome to the conversation from the BBC World Service. This is the show which puts women in the spotlight and allows us to hear the most incredible stories from all around the globe. Today, we're delving into the world of Foley artists. Now, it's their job to recreate the magical sounds you hear in TV shows, films, and video games. My guests today are Caoimhe Doyle from the Republic of Ireland. She's worked on everything from Game of Thrones to the hit dark comedy film The Favourite. And Marita Spey is in Lebanon. She's worked on some of the Arab world's most distinguished art house and indie productions. Caoimhe, Marita, a very warm welcome to the conversation.
Thank you.
Hello.
Before we get into both of your careers, can we find out a bit more about the history of Foley? Caoimhe, can you tell us when it became an integral part of cinema and filmmaking?
I think the first person to put Foley sounds to film was a man called Jack Donovan Foley, and his parents were from Dingle in Ireland, actually, and they left Dingle in County Kerry and went to the States, and he worked at Universal Studios, and he was one of the first to add sound to film afterwards. And then the name stuck, and get the Foley guy, and then the name stuck. So on it goes.
Well, Marita, Foley has often been described as the performed part of sound, and I guess that's what makes it different from simply sound effects. But what does it actually mean in practice? Can you describe it?
Yeah. So it's not only about adding sound effects to the film. Sound performing arts means like physically creating sounds to the image, which are sync in real time, and that can add emotions and life to the film. A great example is a film I worked on where a married couple leaves Beirut's toxic pollution for a utopian life in the mountains, only to have a landfill built next door. So there was a scene in that film where you can see the construction beginning through the eyes of their child's, the 5-year-old child. And this child was watching the machineries destroying all the trees. That we wanted those sounds to feel like they were monsters to that kid. So I had to add more layers. So, for example, I used a lot of instruments, cello, violin, and everything with the contact mic. And I attached them to those instruments. And while I was moving my hands around the instrument, a lot of eerie and squeaky sounds were coming. So I was following in sync the movement of the tractors and mimicking all of their movements through that instrument. If you wanted to edit those with a library effect, you wouldn't be able to follow those movements.
So you're really creating a whole atmosphere just through sound. So how might a Foley session actually work in practice?
Well, we'll get the picture in, and we'll start by performing all of the footsteps for all of the characters. We do that from beginning to end, humans, animals, right top to tail. Then we go back to the top of the movie, and we will cover everything that those actors touch, pick up, how they engage with each other, any kind of touch. So we do that from beginning to end, all of the props. And then we'll go back to the top of the movie again, and we'll do all of the fabric moves. If they're in suits of armour or leather or silk dresses or ordinary denim, and we'll do all the movements. And that's kind of a nice time for us to hear everything back as we're performing and just see how it's all sitting together, playing together. And we'll go to the end. And then at the end of that, then we might have some pickups where we'll go, gosh, it would be really nice to put this little thing in there, or more whoosh. And that tends to be our process.
You've been a Foley artist since the 90s, but this isn't a job that you traditionally hear about in school. How did you find out about it?
I was working as a sound editor, a sound assistant, and I found it very solitary. Well, it was on your own with a computer, and I wasn't really enjoying it a whole lot. And then a Canadian Foley artist called Andy Malcolm came over to Ireland, and I saw him work through a projector window in the theatre one day, and I just couldn't believe what I saw, that was a job, and he was throwing car doors around and doing all sorts, and I was so intrigued. And then he was very open about the craft and invited me in and said, see if you have hand-eye coordination and give it a go. And I was just like immediately fell in love with the process.
Marita, how does that compare to you? Because you're one of only a handful of Foley artists across the Middle East. How easy was it for you to break into?
I had no idea that this could be an actual job and get paid for it. I used to listen to a lot of music, and I wanted to work something related to sound. So I studied filmmaking in Beirut because you don't have that option to study only sound. And at some point I wanted to give up on sound because I didn't know how to get there. But then I went to a workshop in Beirut, and here I met Rana, who's a sound designer, and I discovered that she has a studio in Beirut, and I started working with her, and I started from there. I learned a bit from Nicolas Becker. He's a French Foley artist. I went to Paris and then came back to Beirut and figured it out here.
Caoimhe, it sounds like there's a huge attention to detail needed to not just recreate the sounds, but also the moods associated with the sounds. What is the unique skill set that Foley artists need to have? Can you talk us through it?
Like it's like coming into a dark, airless room for many, many hours doesn't suit. It's not everyone's cup of tea. But for me, I've always really enjoyed stepping in and quietening down my mind, my busy mind, and the hyper focus involved to, to capture the mood of a scene and to subtly move your attention around a screen with sound, sonically draw the audience into different things that are happening on the screen. And it's really engaging to get into that. So you have to have, deal with the dark, attention to detail, the hand-eye coordination. Then for more physical scenes, you need to, relatively good shape because you're running and holding your breath and running on the spot and holding your breath for periods of time. And physically lifting lots of really heavy stuff. So you need
Sometimes
a
you
core.
personally are recreating that sound.
Oh, yeah. 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 Like if it's an action film and the main leading man is running through the inferno and you're doing all the running, all the gear moves, the gun moves, and they grab another big guy and you have to do the body grabs of one guy grabbing another big man. And you have to kind of fill your body with air. I fill my take a big inhale and then use kind of the bass resonance of my body to sound bigger than I am. And and then in the next scene, you could be performing a little toddler taking her first steps. And everything in between, birds and beasts and all of it.
What both of you are doing sounds very liberating because you can be whoever you want to be in terms of sound. How does that feel for you, Marita?
It feels liberating to be able to be another person each day. A man, a woman, a dog, anything. To me, it's escaping reality and being those characters, being whoever you want.
Yeah, I agree with Marita on that. It is so enjoyable to get climb into the skin of another person and reenact all of their movements. And we're lucky enough to follow some really refined actors. It's such a phenomenal craft, acting, and when it's done right, and follow these stories and these really considered performances, and every movement that they've made is really part of the character, and so you don't want to ruin it with the wrong sensibility.
You've both given us such a great sense of the vast range of sounds that you need to recreate and mimic. But Caoimhe, I wondered if you can talk us through what a Foley stage actually looks like. How, what does it consist of?
Our stage here, we've spent years crafting it, and we have all sorts of different surfaces for the footsteps. The footsteps are nearly my favourite thing to perform. So we have surfaces that we can mic underneath, mic above, and mic ambiently in the room. And we have all sorts of really old oak and really old wood, maple, ash, all different types of hardwoods, really thick pieces to try and have a really warm resin, like for the favourite when the Queen is marching up and down the corridors and her entourage are trotting along after her. That those scenes, that it can be sonically, the footsteps can be something that's really beautiful to listen to. So that takes time and effort to craft that. And likewise, we change the ambience of the room. So we have curtains, big thick wool curtains, so we can change the ambience. So again, each little brush stroke makes that magical thing that when picture and sound marry together and become one. It takes many brush strokes to get there, and the acoustics of the room and the mixer, of course, is such a huge part of Foley. Is the performance is one thing; it's only 50%. Who's recording you is the other 50%, and that's really important because that places the character in the scene in the right position and on the screen, acoustically. So that's another huge part. And then we've got hundreds of shoes, hundreds of old, worn, and they're secondhand shoes. So they have, when they arrive in, they have a life in them, someone else's life. You can see them etched in their bunion shapes, etched into the corners of the shoes, or heavy on their heels, or you can see a shoe that's been worn heavily. And I kind of look at those shoes. I find them in the secondhand stores, and I go, oh, there's going to be something in that. And you'd put it on, and you can just sort of get a sense of a downtrodden kind of character. And then likewise, for a smart fella in Italian spats, or a sassy girl in her heels, But the worn-in shoes, you're able to manipulate the shoe a lot easier than a brand new pair of shoes. So lots of smelly old shoes in a Foley stage. They're not the most, it's a dirty business, really, Foley. It's gritty and grimy, and it's not glamorous, and there's dust and dirt everywhere, and horses' feet. We use real horses' feet, so there's horses' feet strewn around the place.
Horses' feet? What do you mean by that? Do you mean the hoof, or the horseshoe?
Yeah, we were using the coconuts, the classic, and we'd filled them with resin, and they were really dense, and they were decent. But when we came to Game of Thrones, those Dothraki horses were so menacing and so intense that we needed to really up the ante. And Andy Malcolm and Goro Koyama, the Foley artists in Canada, who I've been mentoring with for a number of years, they were using real horses' feet that were shod, and so we got them in and we tried them out, and they've been brilliant, really brilliant. They sound so convincing, so authentic.
Marita, how does your studio work in comparison?
I share this room with a musician, and there is a small room where he wanted to record the drums, but he never got them, so I also ruined it and took off all the wooden floor and tried to build some surfaces for the footsteps. But after the port explosion in 2020, the walls were shaken, so the acoustics changed a lot in the room, so I cannot record properly footsteps here. I discovered going up to the mountains in a quiet place with your iPads and having Pro Tools, the software where we record Pro Tools, on the side is something very soothing.
And you must form quite a close relationship with your mixer as well. Because I think, Quiva, you said just recording the sound is only 50% of the job.
Absolutely. Like, I'm so lucky. We're actually a team of 4 women in this studio. 4 women, and then the MD is my lovely husband Johnny, who's the only male in the company. He's a very patient man, but I yeah, outnumbered. But for the last 25 years, I've mostly worked with Jean McGrath, who's one of those fantastic combinations of super clever, bright, tech ed, also really creative and also funny as hell. And so the long, dark hours in the studio, she still can have you laughing at, 8 hours in. So that's kind of a rare combination. And you kind of need to be able to enjoy the time.
And Marita, you mentioned that there had been an explosion in Beirut in 2020, and Lebanon has seen a lot of upheaval in recent years. What would you say have been some of the challenges that you've had to work around in trying to carry out your work?
Like every year you have a new challenge, and it's been like that since 2019, the economic crisis, and then the explosion in 2020. The challenges that I was facing were like the electricity cuts. Like sometimes we didn't have electricity during the day, so it had to cut like in the middle of the day for like 4 hours, so we would just sit and wait. And even to get to the studio, there was a fuel shortage, so we had to wait in the queue to fill our cars for like 5 hours, and it's a bit tough for you to focus on your work while everything around it is like collapsing in the country. But in the end, I managed to finish every film. I'm really grateful for Folly because it helps me forget about what was happening outside. And of course, the war this year in October made things a bit tough to focus on work. Like at some point you have to ask yourself, what am I doing? Like everything is collapsing. Am I doing the right thing or not? But in the end I got my answer, and yes, I love what I'm doing and it's helping me a lot. Getting the chance to work on such films and films that got selected in many festivals makes me feel like good. Like I can do something. I can show that Lebanon still exists in a way, in my own way, which is Folly.
I think you both have a few props with you.
Yeah.
To demonstrate how you create some of these wonderful sounds. Quiva, what do you have?
Well, I thought we just use these. They're actually full of dust, but we use these for Lassie. And come on, boy. So, and we did all of Lassie's little feet. I don't know whether that came over the airwaves.
Lassie's little feet are actually paper
Lassie's
clips
little feet.
stuck to an old cotton glove.
And then this little...
It looks like a little... Is that a keychain?
It's little dog tags and brass rings and a dog chain. And you'll hear that on... what will you hear that on? Killing of a Sacred Deer and Lassie. So this is my third prop here. This is our go-to for breaking bones, leg breaks, and you get this in the day you're cooking your soup, and you go out and you get your celery. So this is a full bunch of celery, and we'll see if we can get this. But we'd layer that. So that would be the bone break. And then we'd do a viscous, tissue tear, flesh tear on top of that. And we'd add a few layers of it. And that's been in movies probably since maybe the 50s, 60s. They probably started doing that's an oldie but a goldie.
And Marita, do you have any props with you that you could do a little demo for us?
Sure. Well, I have many things, but okay, I'll get the easiest.
Ooh, I'm enjoying having a little look, see what you have.
So I have this leather purse,
Oh, yeah.
an old leather purse with a shirt. And usually I do with that the cloth of a soldier or, yeah, playing a soldier. So, wait. And
So that's the sort of armour
Can you-
sound.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quiva, you did the Foley for Normal People, which is a very intense love story over this drama series where the dialogue and even the visuals are quite sparse at times. How did you create the sound for that?
And there was a lot of steamy scenes in that movie.
There were. I watched it over lockdown.
I remember that, and we did a lot of that at night, and we would put my little boy to sleep with all the smelly shoes, and then we'd come in, and because it was lockdown and we had no other options, and we would work while he slept. And I remember doing that movie in the quiet of the night, and it really worked well sonically for it to be so still and quiet, and a lot of those skin moves and sounds and all of that was like, it's really detailed, and it takes a long time to capture the sensuousness of all of those scenes. It takes a lot of time, and we everything was really deep. There was nowhere to hide because there wasn't a really big atmosphere or driving music track through a lot of it, but really it was a gorgeous series to work on, and even watching it, we knew, God, this is really amazing. The chemistry and the cinematography, all of it, the direction, it was gorgeous. And we'd done a good few jobs with Lenny Abrahamson before, and there's always space in his shooting to get into a track sonically.
I mean, as you say, there were some very steamy scenes, but they were very tender. How do you create or recreate the sound of a kiss?
Well, you have to understand the motivation behind the kiss, and if it's or if it's a mother's kiss, a peck, or if it's a smoochy kiss, you have to really allow yourself to act, I suppose, to really capture the real drive and essence behind the kiss. And if you're not able or don't allow yourself to sort of like cut loose to looking like a Wally kissing your hand in the room, passionately, that's where we have to go, capturing the beauty of that. And the sound of a skin stroke or a hair stroke is a beautiful sound. It's a really beautiful thing. And when you can capture it with the right sonic, the right acoustic, the right performance, the right tenderness, it's so immersive. You really feel like you're in the room with the two characters witnessing this gorgeous thing, and it's powerful and affecting, and I think like soundtracks can really pull you into those moments.
The sound is so emotionally connecting for so many people because you can recognise that regardless of the country you're in or the language you speak.
Absolutely, totally, worldwide, yeah, absolutely.
Do either of you worry about the impact that AI might have on your industry and work?
I think we should all be afraid, but for Folly, I always think that what I'm more concerned about is human beings relying too much on AI. Like, if it's organizing my files or my sessions, fine, do it. But I don't think it can replace a human being. Like, when we will lose the human touch, that's here I will feel like there's a problem. Like, if Folly cannot be that clean and perfect. Like Folly is the opposite of that. It's about imperfection. It's about being spontaneous, and I don't think AI can replace that.
Quiva, what do you think?
Yeah, like I think, and I mean, I don't think I'm a great sharp knife in the box, but I mean, listen, it's brilliant and all that, but I feel like just exactly like Marita is saying, the nuances of human behavior and performance. I don't know, like, typing in sad high heels ditched at a nightclub, sad high heels across empty car park. I don't know, like maybe they'll get it there, but it's so nuanced what we do. It's ridiculously nuanced. It's endlessly nuanced that I'd be wildly impressed if there's a Foley bot that can that can do it. But as you say, we should all be afraid. Like, it's scary stuff.
One very last question. Are there any sounds that you are just sick of, that you never want to hear or recreate again?
Phone taps.
Oh, I love phone taps.
Controversial.
I hate food scenes. I hate eating. Like, always figuring out what should I get out of the fridge, something that like 2 days old from the team. Like, I take it and I will eat it for Folly. I hate that.
Thank you so much to both of you. That was super fascinating.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having us.
Thank you for having us.